In the black silence beyond the astronomican's trembling light, something ancient stirred, a pulse, deep and rhythmic, echoing through the ocean of stars. The void itself seemed to heave, as if taking breath after an eternity of stillness. Across the galaxy's fringe, sensors flickered and failed, machine spirits wailed in confusion. The Mechanicus declared it an anomaly of the warp, but no scripture, no binary hymn could explain the slow, tidal movement of the void itself. For eons untold, beneath the currents of the Imperium, a god had slept. His dreams were heavy things, filled with drowned worlds, broken empires, and the taste of salt upon the ashes of creation. The sea god, whose name had been forgotten even by the oldest demons, opened his eyes. They were blue suns, vast and furious, casting light upon the bones of forgotten leviathans that swam between galaxies. A low thunder rolled through the fabric of reality. Warp space convulsed like a body in pain. What began as a whisper of static across astropathic choirs soon grew into a roar that silenced entire systems. The Astronomicon, that holy flame by which the Imperium found its path, flickered. Its light rippled, warped, and bent as if refracted through deep, unseen waters. Ships vanished, not in battle nor through the treachery of the warp, but as though swallowed by something vast and wet, a pressure beyond comprehension. Navigators screamed in unison, their third eyes bleeding light. They saw tides, not of water, but of thought, waves of divine intent rolling through the cosmos, submerging stars. On Terra, the priests of the ecclesiarchy gathered before the golden throne and chanted litanies of protection. Their voices echoed through marble halls, but no sound left their lips. The air itself had thickened, as if reality had become viscous, heavy. From the black seas of Luna's far side to the gas clouds beyond Jupiter, moisture gathered where there should have been none. The void wept condensation like the breath of a god returning to life. Then, without warning, came the first tide. It began in the halo stars, an invisible wall of pressure, spreading outward in every direction, sweeping through real space with the weight of oceans. Planets trembled, moons shattered like brittle coral. The psychic signature was unmistakable. This was not chaos. It was something else, older, colder, cleaner in its fury. It was divine balance made manifest. Billions felt it before it struck, an ache in the lungs, a tightening of the chest, as if the entire galaxy inhaled at once. And then came the flood. But not of water, not yet. The flood was light, liquid blue, dense as mercury, flowing through the stars. It devoured void craft, dissolving them into motes of radiant plankton. It rolled over black holes and extinguished them like candles. It filled the gaps between atoms, turned plasma into tide and starlight into surf. Those who looked upon it went mad, not from fear, but from awe. On the shrine world of Celestara IX, pilgrims watched as the heavens turned to sea. Waves of brilliance crashed across the sky, their foam alive with phantasmal shapes, silhouettes of whales made of constellations, serpents woven from nebulae. The faithful fell to their knees, praying, screaming, or simply weeping as temples shook and bell towers dissolved into shimmering mist. In the depths of the warp, even the demons recoiled, for the sea god was not of their kind. His essence was not born of corruption, nor did it feed on mortal sin. His domain was purity of ruin, the cleansing destruction that followed divine disappointment. He had watched creation rot beneath its own arrogance. Now he rose to wash it clean. And so the void rippled with abyssal memory. The ancient wars between gods and stars replayed like dreams in the black. Poseidon, or what the mortals once named him, recalled the betrayal of man's pride, the blasphemy of machines, the hunger of chaos. All of it stank of decay, all of it begged for drowning. On Macragge, the ultramarines, Librarius burned with psychic interference. The chapter's seers fell to their knees, clutching their temples as visions of endless water consumed their minds. Gilliman himself, deep within the fortress monastery, felt the shift, that same cold tide pressing at the edges of his reason. He knew it was not the ruinous powers. This was something that had forgotten mortals existed long before their birth. In orbit above Nocturne, the salamanders gazed into a horizon of moving light. It was as if the stars themselves had become waves, cresting and collapsing in slow, celestial rhythm. Even the heat of their world seemed dimmed, swallowed by the chill of something vast approaching. And somewhere between Terra and the edge of the segmentum Pacificus, a single astropath survived long enough to transmit a fragmented message. His voice was calm, though the sound of rushing water filled every syllable. He rises, the firmament cracks, the oceans have come home. Moments later, the signal cut. In the vacuum of space, where there should have been nothing, shapes began to move. Colossal silhouettes, not ships, but forms resembling titanic sea creatures sculpted from pure warp energy, swam between planets. Their movements were slow, majestic, mournful, each left behind a trail of luminescent wake that clung to reality like frost. And above them all, vast beyond comprehension, a crown broke through the darkness, an immense halo of liquid gold, rimmed with coral spires that pierced the stars. From its center, two eyes glowed like twin blue suns, gazing upon the galaxy as one might a ruined temple. Poseidon had awoken. The galaxies trembled, and the sea god lifted his hand. From his palm dripped the first drop, a perfect sphere of divine water, heavy as a world. When it fell, it struck the veil of reality and shattered it like glass. The flood eternal, a ripple of distortion racing through the skein of the Imperium, and then, in the span of hours, the galaxy screamed. The first waves of Poseidon's flood fell upon the hive worlds, and the sound of them was like the tearing of heaven itself. They struck not as simple water, but as liquid divinity, folding through void and matter alike, defying the physics that bound mortal existence. The skies above Necromunda were the first to rupture. Billions looked upward and saw their sun twist into a whirling vortex of blue light, its core imploding into an impossible sea that poured downward, unending. The hive towers, those mountains of iron and filth, reaching like blasphemous cathedrals toward the stars, trembled beneath the celestial torrent. Spires cracked like bones. Factories were swept away as rivers of shining water cascaded down levels where no rain had fallen for 10,000 years. The underhive became an ocean trench, its billions entombed beneath kilometers of divine pressure. Above the churning world, Imperial void ships tried to flee. Great cruisers of the Gothic class turned their engines toward the warp, their machine spirits howling in desperation. But the tides found them even there. The moment they breached reality, the flood followed, an impossible current threading through the Immerse like the arteries of a god. The waters filled the warp, forcing demons to scatter like fish before a predator. Even the chaos fleets that lurked in secret strongholds watched in awe as Poseidon's essence cascaded through their unholy realms, cleansing and unmaking. Across Segmentum Solar, every planet of man felt the tremor. On Terra, the High Lords convened in panic. Hololithic projections of systems being swallowed by light flickered across the stratagem's walls. Tech priests screamed in binaric bursts as the Astronomican's beam faltered once again, its reach dimmed beneath the rising tide. The Emperor's light shimmered through the storm, flickering like a candle beneath glassy water. And yet, in all their fear, none could deny the beauty of it. For when the flood came, it brought not only destruction, but strange, terrible grace. Cathedrals of the ecclesiarchy, built upon worlds once scorched by war, found themselves mirrored upon tranquil seas that stretched beyond sight. Leviathans of pure warp water breached from beneath them, forms both angelic and monstrous, their bodies translucent and filled with drifting constellations. Their cries were like organ hymns, shaking the heavens with notes that made mortals weep blood. On the shrine world of Ophelion Primaris, Cardinal Lord Vasca led a prayer from the balcony of his floating basilica. Beneath him, billions of pilgrims drowned in silence, their bodies weightless, faces lifted toward the light. "Deliver us, O Lord of Depths," he cried, though he did not know to whom he prayed, for in that hour even faith was unmoored. The God Emperor's name, once unassailable, trembled upon lips now filled with salt water. In orbit above the doomed world, the Imperial Navy's flagship Vigilant Exemplar attempted to maintain station. But the ship's sensors showed madness. Their void shields shimmered not from enemy fire, but from waves that struck without source, patterns of light and pressure coiling through the vacuum as if space itself were liquid. Captain Mala, a man forged in 100 campaigns, stood upon his bridge in disbelief. The stars outside were moving, bending as though submerged beneath a vast, unseen ocean. "By the throne," he whispered, "we're sinking." And so they were. The fleet drifted downward, not toward any planetary gravity well, but into a depression forming in the void, a whirlpool of warp-light vast enough to swallow suns. The Mechanicus tech priests screamed to the machine spirits, but their voices were lost in static. Runes across the consoles flickered with watery light, translating into impossible binary. Submersion initiated. Mala gave the order to fire. Macro-cannon rounds ripped through the dark, exploding into geysers of burning plasma. Torpedoes vanished without trace. It was like firing into an ocean that absorbed all heat, all sound, all fury. The ship's hymns to the Omnissiah became distorted echoes, their binary prayers drawn out like drowning voices. Then the Exemplar's hull began to sing. The sound rose deep from within the adamantine bones of the ship, a haunting, harmonic resonance like the bellow of a whale echoing through the cosmos. Crewmen fell to their knees, clutching their ears. The Jella field flickered, revealing visions within the water that now filled the void, titanic silhouettes, their shapes unknown, gliding closer. The largest of them opened an eye. Blue light flooded the bridge. Every mortal aboard saw it, a single gaze filled with ancient sorrow and divine purpose. In that instant, they understood this was not punishment, it was cleansing. The Imperium had become rot clinging to the rocks of eternity, and Poseidon had come to wash it away. The vigilant Exemplar vanished into the flood, leaving behind only a wake of radiant mist. Back on the hive world's surface, the last of the spires fell. Cities turned to coral ruins, their twisted remains reflecting shimmering light from the heavens. Titans, those walking cathedrals of war, sank to their knees, their servos shrieking as their weapons failed. One by one, they toppled, their corpses half buried beneath translucent waves. Across the drowned plains, the thunder of their fall echoed like the tolling of bells. And then silence. For a heartbeat, the galaxy held its breath. Billions of worlds, once burning with life and hatred, now lay beneath the quiet shimmer of liquid starlight. The flood had no sound anymore, it simply was. Endless, eternal, still. From orbit, it was beautiful, a tapestry of glowing oceans, spanning across constellations, rippling like silk. Astropaths who gazed upon it from sanctums across the Imperium wept tears of salt, whispering words they could not comprehend. The sea has remembered, they said, and it wants us back. But beauty, in the 41st millennium, is never mercy. Within the light of those impossible seas, something moved. Shapes, vast beyond logic, prowled the drowned firmament, leviathans that blotted out entire sectors as they swam through the flood. Their scales shimmered with psionic power, their movements sending waves through both real space and warp. They hunted the last survivors of the Imperium's void fleets like prey, surrounding them in silence. On the edge of the segmentum obscurus, a single world resisted. Its spires glowed with the power of 1,000 shields, its orbit ringed by fortress moons. Yet even there, the water rose, creeping up the walls of its cities, whispering through its vox channels, filling its catacombs. Priests prayed in the upper towers, while soldiers fired blindly into the rising tide, their bullets falling like rain into the sea. And then, from the heavens, came a shadow, the silhouette of a hand made of light, descending through the clouds. It touched the planet's surface as gently as a sigh. The world was gone before the echo faded. Thus did the second tide fall, and in its wake, the galaxy learned what divine silence followed the second tide. Movement stirred again, slow, deliberate, and impossibly vast. Where once stars had burned, now lay a cathedral of blue darkness. The galaxy submerged beneath divine water, a mirror to the void itself. Beneath its glowing depths, constellations swam like plankton. Debris of empires drifted past, the husks of ships, the bones of worlds, the ghosts of prayers. And then, from those depths, light began to gather. It shimmered first as a pulse, then as a storm of motion, columns of silver radiance twisting upward through the sea of stars. Within them, shapes formed, coalescing from silted starlight and divine sediment. They were humanoid, yet wrong, their frames sculpted from drowned galaxies, their veins lit by liquid flame. Upon their shoulders lay the weight of oceans. Upon their brows, coral crowns, heavy with the memory of eternity. These were the thalassarchs, Poseidon's emissaries, angels of salt and ruin, risen from the bedrock of creation to carry out their god's final judgment. Each bore a trident forged from the cores of extinguished suns, its prongs glowing with the fire of drowned nebulae. When they lifted these weapons, the flood itself bent to their will, parting before them like silk. They walked upon the surface of submerged planets, and wherever their feet touched, life forgot how to breathe. One by one, the thalassarchs descended into the realms of man. On the ruined world of Violian, where once billions had prayed to the Emperor, the last remnants of the Astra Militarum fought knee-deep in divine seawater. Their lasguns sputtered, their vox networks screamed static. The air tasted of iron and salt. Captain Erind Hale of the 143rd Cadian Regiment stood atop a broken basilica, his eyes fixed upon the horizon where three towering silhouettes advanced through the mist. At first he thought they were Titans, but Titans did not glow. As they approached, he saw what they truly were, immense figures, their bodies fluid and radiant, armor carved from the shells of cosmic leviathans. The water parted before them as if bowing in reverence. Their eyes burned with distant suns. "Hold the line," Hale whispered, though his voice trembled. The command meant nothing. The soldiers around him raised their weapons more out of fear than faith. Bolter fire erupted, shells streaking through the air like sparks. They struck the thalassarchs and vanished, absorbed into the divine aura that surrounded them. The beings did not even slow. One lifted its trident. With a single sweep, the sea rose, a towering wall of water that curved above the soldiers like an executioner's blade. For a heartbeat, they saw their reflections upon its surface, faces pale, eyes wide, the ghosts of men already dead. Then it fell. The basilica vanished. The 143rd Cadian Regiment became a whisper beneath the waves. When the flood receded, only coral remained, coral shaped like men mid-prayer, mouths open, lungs filled with light. From orbit, Mechanicus probes recorded the event in silent awe. The data transmitted back to Mars spoke of energy readings beyond measure, of psychic resonance matching neither Chaos nor Xeno's origin. Tech priests analyzed, debated, chanted litanies of logic, but none could identify what God's hand had crafted such power. The Omnissiah, they reasoned, did not weep, yet their machinery corroded as if crying rust. Far across the void, on a planet half consumed by the flood eternal, a space marine chapter made its stand. The Abyssal Fists, a successor of the Imperial Fists, held the remnants of a fortress monastery perched atop a mountain now adrift upon an endless ocean. Their chaplain, Varan Luthor, stood at the battlements, his crozius raised to the dim sky. "We are sons of dawn," he roared, his voice amplified through vox and storm alike. "We will not drown while faith still burns within us." The words echoed through the flooded fortress, stirring what little remained of courage among his brothers. Dozens of Astartes stood beside him, armor encrusted with barnacles, ceramite rusted by psychic moisture. They fought not for victory, but for defiance, the only gift left to mortals in the face of gods. The ocean answered. From the horizon, a colossal shape emerged, a being so vast that even the Astartes felt small in its presence. It was no demon, no Xenos. Its form was sculpted of translucent water and shifting stormlight, its eyes ancient and mournful. In its hand, it carried a trident longer than a fortress wall, its prongs crackling with contained galaxies. When it moved, the tide followed. Mountains cracked beneath its shadow, the fortress shuddered as if sensing its own death. "Target the head," Varan ordered. "Make it bleed or die trying." Plasma cannons roared. Missiles streaked through the air. For a moment, the giant staggered, blue fire searing through its form. But then it lowered its gaze upon them, and the sea obeyed. A single gesture, and the world tilted. The mountain upon which they stood crumbled into the deep. The fortress monastery sank with it, dragged downward by invisible currents. Astartes shouted litanies into the drowning void as they were pulled under. Armor cracked under the pressure, servos screamed. Yet in that moment, Varan saw something through the distortion of the water, through the endless light. The giant's eyes held not cruelty, but grief, as if this destruction pained it as deeply as it glorified its god. Then darkness claimed him. Throughout the drowned galaxy, similar scenes unfolded. On 1,000 worlds, tridents split the skies. On 1,000 more, seas rose to consume temples and manufactorums alike. The warp trembled beneath the weight of order, not chaos, not malice, but judgment. The Emperor's Tarot, in its golden vault beneath the Imperial Palace, began to fail. The cards once alive with psychic flame now showed only water, endlessly reflecting themselves. Astropaths across the Imperium fell silent, their minds filled with the same unanswerable vision, a single ripple spreading through eternity. And in the deepest sanctum of the Ordo Malleus, Inquisitor Lord Tyras watched his servitors record the last readable transmission from the drowned systems. A voice, distorted, echoing through liquid interference, spoke only 4 words. "The sea remembers us." Then came the crackle of static and silence. Across the galaxy, the flood deepened. The thalassarchs continued their march through lightless oceans, raising their tridents to the heavens in unison. Above them, the sea god's gaze remained fixed, his fury calm, his will unyielding. The deluge was no longer coming. The once glittering forge worlds of the Imperium, the hymn of the machine god began to falter. The binary choirs of Mars, those endless streams of sacred code whispered into the dark, became corrupted by static that sounded like the roaring of waves. The Omnissiah's circuits, which had pulsed with fire since the age of strife, dimmed beneath an impossible damp. No flame could resist it. Even plasma itself flickered, as though oxygen had fled from creation. The first world to fall was Risa, the furnace heart of the segmentum obscurus. Its orbital rings, iron halos encircling a sun, burned red one moment, then bled blue the next, their forges quenched by water that poured from nowhere and everywhere. The adepts called it condensation from the void, but the word condensation meant nothing when oceans condensed from vacuum itself. Steel screamed as it cooled. Titans still in assembly froze mid-motion, their limbs half-raised in a gesture that might have been prayer. On the factory floors, engineers knelt as the water rose to their knees. They tried to chant the litany of ignition to bless the machine spirits back to life, but their vox-amplified voices gurgled with interference. The hymn became a drowning noise, syllables bubbling through oil and blood. Holy circuits sparked. Cogitators, once steady in their rhythm, began to hum a new frequency, a deep, slow resonance, as if echoing a heartbeat beneath the metal. It was not theirs. Flood here was not fast, it was inevitable. It came as vapor first, fogging every lens and sensor. It came as dew, slicking the hallowed pistons of macro-engines. Then it came as a tide that rolled through the manufactorums with quiet purpose, moving uphill, defying gravity and faith alike. The Omnissiah's sigils rusted in seconds. Servo skulls dropped from the air, their optics flickering blue before extinguishing completely. The tech priests did not scream when the water reached their faces. They simply extended their mechadendrites toward the surface, as if reaching for understanding. From orbit, the Magos Explorator Selenite watched the Forge world vanish beneath a calm, mirror-smooth ocean. The readings were impossible, pressure without mass, movement without origin. The ship's noospheric data filled with strange symbols, curves resembling shell spirals, intersecting tridents, the geometry of tides. It was as if the universe itself had rewritten its equations into the language of the sea. On Mars, panic spread like contagion. The great forges of Olympus Mons trembled as rivers of quicksilver water seeped through subterranean vaults thought sealed since the dawn of the Mechanicum. Magos Domini gathered before the altar of the Prime Forge, their robes damp, their metallic limbs corroded by salt. One of them, ancient Magos Nerlith Vho, placed his hand upon the sacred cogitator to request counsel from the machine god. What answered was not the Omnissiah. From the speakers issued a sound like the crash of surf on distant cliffs. Then a voice, deep, mournful, patient as the abyss, spoke through every vox and data stream in unison. You built your gods from metal and fire, yet all things return to water. The Magi fell to their knees. Some tore out their own augmetics, screaming blasphemy and revelation in equal measure. Others offered their minds willingly, letting the tide flow through the wires, converting their consciousness into liquid data that dissolved into the flood. Within hours, the red planet was transformed. Its sands turned to glass. Its forges became reefs of corroded steel, glowing faintly with bioluminescent code. The machine cult had been baptized in silence. Elsewhere, the ecclesiarchy fared no better. On the shrine world of Luminara, the great basilica of St. Drusilla had survived 1,000 wars and 7 excommunications. Its vaults contained relics that had burned demons and crowned emperors. When the flood reached it, the sky was clear. A storm did not announce it. The air simply thickened until light bent, and a translucent veil descended, silent as grace. The Sisters of Battle marched through the nave in full armor, bolters ready, psalms blaring from organ towers that rose above the rising tide. Their canoness, Sephira Altyne, stood before the altar, her armor gleaming like a beacon in the dim glow. She aimed her blade toward the heavens and cried, "By his light, no tide shall claim us." The flood answered not with fury, but with reflection. The ceiling of the basilica mirrored her perfectly, every column, every candle, every sister inverted in a ghostly symmetry. For a heartbeat, both worlds touched, the real and its reflection. Then the mirror shattered. The flood fell. It filled the basilica in seconds, slamming through stained glass, tearing marble from its roots. The sisters fired, their rounds trailing bubbles instead of smoke. Hymns turned to muffled echoes, yet they fought, and the light of their faith burned bright enough to carve holes in the tide. For every drop that extinguished one, 100 more glowed brighter. Sephira watched the altar break. The golden effigy of the emperor toppled, sinking in slow motion, his outstretched hand disappearing into the dark. For the first time in her life, she saw the divine face of her god distorted through water, and for the first time, she did not recognize it. Outside, the world of Luminara disappeared beneath a sheen of light. From orbit, the ocean gleamed like a sapphire eye staring back into the void. Across the segmentum pacificus, faith dissolved as salt upon stone. Vox choirs ceased their hymns. Priests fell silent mid-prayer. The galaxy's endless chorus of devotion, billions of voices whispering to the emperor every second, was swallowed by the stillness of divine submersion. The only sound that remained was the slow pulse of water moving through the stars, the rhythm of a god reclaiming his domain. In the drowned ruins of Ryza, something shifted. The reactors, now coral-encrusted, began to thrum with faint light. The flood did not extinguish their power, it converted it. Each machine became an organ pipe, each current a hymn. The sound was haunting, mechanical yet alive, reverent yet alien. The surviving tech priests, now half flesh, half coral, sang with it. Their voices harmonized with the water's tone, creating a new prayer, a binary liturgy of surrender. Blessed be corrosion, which frees the soul from form. Blessed be the sea, the mother of all circuits. Thus was born the cult of the deep mechanicum, those who saw in Poseidon not annihilation, but evolution. They would spread across the remaining sectors, merging flesh, metal, and tide into one. For the Imperium at large, this was heresy beyond measure. Yet no inquisitor's flame could reach them, for no flame burned beneath the flood. The Aquila itself corroded upon cathedrals. The skull shrines of Mars collapsed under the weight of barnacles and silence. And so faith, the last fortress of humanity, began to rust, not through disbelief, but through awe. For as the galaxies drifted beneath the light of drowned suns, even the most devout began to understand this was not the end. It was the cleansing before the next breath. The sea had not come to destroy, it had come to remember. Where light could no longer reach and silence reigned absolute, something vast began to stir. The tide was not the source, it was only the messenger. Deep beneath Ryza's drowned furnaces, below Luminara's sunken basilicas, and under the black seas that now veiled the stars themselves, there was movement, slow, patient, immeasurable. The Imperium's instruments called it gravitational distortion. The survivors whispered another name, the Leviathan below. It had no beginning, for it had been dreaming since the first water cooled the first world. When fire was born in the stars, it slept. When man lit his torches and raised his prayers, it waited. Now, as the galaxy drowned, its dream turned to awakening. In the drowned ruins of the forged temple of Ryza, where coral and circuitry had become one, the priestess of the deep mechanicum, once Magos Nerlith Vho, descended alone through a shaft of glass water. Her body was more coral than steel now, her eyes glowing with blue bioluminescence. The deeper she fell, the quieter the hum of the machines became. Even the current seemed to hold its breath. At last she reached the abyssal plain, a trench of infinite blackness stretching farther than any map could measure. Her senses registered nothing, no heat, no light, no sound, yet her mind was filled with an overwhelming sense of presence, as though the darkness itself was thinking. She spoke in binary prayer. O depth unmeasured, whose silence is wisdom, whose pressure is grace, show thy purpose. No voice replied. Instead, the trench exhaled. The water moved, not with current, but with intention. Silt rose like clouds, swirling in symmetrical spirals. From the dark, shapes began to form, colossal, fluid outlines that defied reason. Scales of abyssal glass reflected distant galaxies. Tendrils thicker than hive spires brushed against the seabed, each motion slow as the turning of worlds. Then came the eye. It opened like the dawn, one vast, circular pupil rimmed in shimmering blue, larger than cities, older than time. Within it swam galaxies in miniature, each caught in orbit around a nucleus of impossible light. The Leviathan was not a creature of flesh. It was consciousness given oceanic form, divine, geometric, infinite. Nerlith fell to her knees, not in fear, but recognition. The Mechanicum had always believed the machine god resided in the sun. Yet here, beneath the water, she saw the truth. The god in the fire was only a reflection, the light that shimmered upon the surface of something far deeper. The Leviathan spoke, not through sound, but through memory. It entered her mind like a tide, and she saw visions that were not hers. A world before the Imperium, when the first seas dreamed stars into existence. Civilizations that built towers from coral and bone, then sank willingly when their purpose was done. 1,000 empires rising and falling like waves. And at the center of all things, the heart of the sea itself, pulsing with the rhythm of creation. Then came a final whisper. You built your empire on dust, I build mine on depth. The water trembled, mountains cracked. From every drowned world across the galaxy, deep trenches opened like wounds, and from within them poured light, the same pale, luminous blue that had filled the Mechanicum's dying circuits. These were not rifts, but arteries linking world to world, ocean to ocean, thought to thought. The Leviathan was not a single being, it was a network, a consciousness flowing through every molecule of water in the galaxy. The flood had not spread to destroy, it had spread to connect. But the Imperium above saw only death. On the fortress world of Cadia reclaimed, one of the last bastions not yet consumed by the sea, the surviving Astra Militarum prepared for war. Their artillery, rusting but functional, faced the horizon where the flood shimmered like liquid glass. Commissar Geraint stood upon the battlements, his uniform stiff with salt, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Men, he shouted, you stand for humanity, for the Emperor whose light still burns above the tide. But even as he spoke, the light flickered, the dawn rose blue. A single drop of water fell from the sky, then another and another, until it became a rain that smelled of the sea. The soldiers did not retreat. They aimed their lasguns toward the heavens, firing at clouds, but lightning answered their fire with silence. The flood came not from the ground, but from above. Orbital satellites transmitted images of impossible beauty and terror. Entire oceans suspended in orbit, glimmering spheres of liquid, descending slowly upon the planets below. Worlds drowned from the top down, their skis filling with oceans before the ground ever felt a drop. In the command bastion, Geraint watched the last transmission from the fleet. The final image before the signal cut was not a ship, but an eye vast and serene filling the void. He whispered, Emperor, save us. And somewhere, deep beneath his world, the Leviathan stirred again. The waters of Cadia met the trenches of Risa. Luminara's reflection joined them. Across the void, worlds that had never known each other now shared one pulse, one breath, one song. The choir of the drowned began to hum, not in despair, but in reverence. It was a sound too low for any voxcaster to capture, yet it reached every living mind still capable of dreaming. Children on hive worlds heard it in their sleep. Navigators in their void ships felt it pulsing beneath the warp. Even the Astartes, The Emperor's angels paused mid-battle as their armor's machine spirits trembled with recognition. They all heard the same whisper in the depths of their thoughts. Not the end, the deep beginning. The Leviathan below was awake now, and its song was rewriting creation. Stars flickered as if reflecting waves, nebulae coiled into spirals that resembled seashells. The galaxy itself, that ancient wheel of light, began to shimmer as though submerged in glass. Space bent under the pressure of the flood's memory, and even the warp, chaos incarnate, grew still, as if humbled by something older than gods. In the abyss where Nerlith still knelt, the Leviathan withdrew, leaving behind a single word etched into her mind, glowing brighter than plasma, deeper than gravity: surface. She understood. The flood had come to cleanse. Now it would rise to claim. And above, where ruined cathedrals and silent ships drifted beneath a newborn sea, the first ripples of the final ascent began. Not the kind born of absence, but of completion. Every vibration, every scream, every echo of battle had been drawn into the deep, swallowed by a stillness that felt almost sacred. The oceans of Poseidon had risen beyond planets, beyond stars, until even the void itself seemed submerged. Nebulae drifted like silt in the eternal tide. Galaxies shimmered faintly beneath the translucent veil of the flood eternal, their light refracted into endless blues. From the drowned stars rose the reflection of what once was the Imperium, vast, broken, beautiful in its surrender. Each world, once bound by fire and industry, now hung like a pearl suspended in water. There were no vox signals, no warp traffic, no hymns of devotion, only the pulse of the sea, moving through every atom like a heartbeat. The last transmission from Terra came not as sound, but as a flicker, a beacon that flashed once, then was gone. The Astronomicon, that ancient psychic flame lit by the Emperor's will, dimmed beneath the pressure of the tide. For millennia it had burned unchallenged, guiding the ships of mankind through the madness of the warp. Now its light bent, rippling through the flood like a candle beneath glass. And when it finally went dark, the galaxy did not die. It exhaled. In the hollow ruins of the Imperial Palace, water lapped against the thrones of ages. The Golden Throne, long the heart of humanity's dominion, stood half-submerged in shimmering azure. Its machinery, once screaming with the agony of 10,000 souls, now murmured softly, the song of current through conduit, tide through time. The Emperor's body, enshrined in radiant decay, lay still, but the ocean around him glowed faintly with psychic light, as though even death could not resist being sanctified by the flood. Some say his eyes opened for the first time in 10,000 years, not in rage, but in recognition. Beyond Terra, the Astartes fought on, scattered legions of demigods clinging to their final myths. Upon the oceanic remnants of Calth, ultramarines in barnacled ceramite waded through knee-high waves, their bolters useless against the endless water. Brother Captain Defon raised his blade toward the horizon, where the sea met the stars, and saw the reflection of himself ripple into infinity. Behind him, the last fortress sank slowly beneath the waves. He whispered a litany older than war. Even the Emperor's wrath must one day rest. The water answered. A shape emerged from the horizon, vast, unending, luminous. It was neither storm nor beast, but both. Poseidon, the sea god, rose from the reflection of galaxies, his form composed of shifting tides and molten sapphire light. His trident gleamed like a shard of reality itself. Around him, the drowned constellations bent their light, forming a crown of broken suns. His face was neither mortal nor divine, it was the calm of inevitability. Every warrior still breathing felt his presence press against their soul. Some fell to their knees, others raised their weapons in defiance. None could move when he spoke. "You fought the stars," he said, his voice echoing through the marrow of creation. "Now face what birthed them." Planets cracked as the sound passed through them. Oceans boiled, then cooled, then stilled. The warp, that eternal sea of madness, began to collapse inward, its infinite storms drawn into the Leviathan below. Demons screamed soundlessly as they were folded into the tide, their essence dissolved into silence. The chaos gods themselves felt the current pull at them, tugging at their domains like a tide claiming forgotten shores. Khorne's crimson oceans turned black. Nurgle's gardens rotted into salt. Tzeentch's flames flickered beneath the pressure of cold eternity, and Slanesh's symphonies became nothing more than ripples in the deep. The warp was not destroyed, it was baptized. The surviving psychers of the Imperium, driven mad or hollow-eyed by the weight of the flood, began to see visions. In each mind bloomed the same image, a sea of impossible calm, upon which drifted the remnants of stars, and beneath that surface, light, pure and endless, breathing. The flood eternal was not merely vengeance, it was transformation. On the drowned world of Macragge, beneath the ruins of Ultramar, coral now grew from the statues of heroes. Gene-seed tanks, long thought lost, began to glow with phosphorescent blue. Within them, the next generation of warriors stirred, not space marines as before, but beings attuned to the tide, armored in plates that shimmered like fish scales. They did not serve the Imperium nor Poseidon. They served the ocean itself, the balance between light and abyss. The Mechanicus, or what little remained, watched in awe as rusted forges reignited with bioluminescent flame. The machine spirits that once howled for maintenance now hummed in harmony with the current. Technology and nature, long divided, merged into something new, living circuits, organic reactors, cathedrals that pulsed with water instead of smoke. Humanity had not perished, it had changed shape. The galaxy, once a place of endless conquest, now breathed as one organism. Stars pulsed like organs, planets drifted like cells, all connected by the same luminous tide. The flood had ended empires, but in its wake came equilibrium, the quiet hum of something older than civilization, something truer than victory. Above the drowned ruins of Holy Terra, Poseidon looked down upon his work. His trident sank into the surface of the ocean, touching the submerged throne. A wave of light rippled outward, and for a moment the Emperor's reflection met his. Neither god bowed, neither spoke. Between them stretched the calm recognition of equals, creators and destroyers, united by the inevitability of cycle. Then slowly Poseidon began to sink. His form dissolved into the tide, becoming one with the Leviathan below, until nothing remained but the whisper of waves and the shimmer of galaxies seen through water. The sea closed over him like a final benediction. And in that silence, the galaxy listened. Where there had been tyranny, there was stillness. Where there had been fire, there was reflection. And where there had been war, there was at last understanding that even the stars must someday drown to be reborn. From the drowned stars rose a single reflection, a universe reborn in water and judgment. And in that reflection, the Imperium beheld its final baptism. The flood eternal was complete.